Welcome to another episode of the Art and Science of Leadership podcast. We are pleased by popular demand to have Dr. Angela Kim returning for another episode with us. As you may remember from our first conversation, Dr. Kim is board certified in forensic psychiatry and psychiatry, and is just an amazing thinker as it relates to the topics that are relevant to those of you that are listening to this podcast. And we had a wonderful dialogue a few months ago. We want to make sure that we pull through some of those discussion topics into this episode to expound upon those more significantly and substantively, because there is such an interest in what Dr. Kim has to say. So, Angela, thank you for returning with us. We are so happy that you are willing to do this again.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It's my pleasure.
So let me start out with a quote. And it's going to lead us into a couple topics that you and I are both interested in talking about today, because we see it in our respective practices. Those two topics are really around motivation and incentives for how we can lead organizations, but also the idea of mindset and how we can affect and create more positive growth mindset. And these are areas where your expertise has never been more relevant to the world of organizational development and organizational leadership. So that's where these things come together. So thank you. But I want to start with a quote from a famous venture capitalist and famous entrepreneur, Mark Andreessen, who said this: "The hardest thing for a CEO to do is to manage their own psychology." And I found that to be so interesting because, as you and I have talked a little bit, there has to be almost this inward reflection before there can be an outward manifestation of mindset, of motivation. And so when you hear that statement, how does that land with you? Does that like, oh, of course, that's a hard challenge for leaders today?
I think that's a hard challenge, not only for leaders, but I think for all of us. What it comes down to is I think the majority of us are not aware or self-aware. And so being aware of ourselves is number one, but then being able to manage. And being aware of ourselves requires us to be aware of what our mindset is. So most of us go throughout the day and we don't think about ourselves. We think about our environment and the world around us, things that are being done to us or happening around us. And we focus on that rather than being self-aware of where we're at, let alone our own mindset. Mindset is so important, though, because mindset, by the way, it's our attitude, our belief that dictates our behaviors and how we react with the environment around us. So it is hugely important. And there are different kinds of mindsets. And if we're aware of a certain unhealthy mindset, then that can be huge in terms of modifying how we interact with people in our lives and the environment around us.
So that's encouraging on many levels. And I think what is important to take away from that, among other things, is the fact that whether you are a chief executive or in any leadership role, or if you're walking the earth, there is an opportunity for a better, more enhanced life by understanding that self-awareness of your own mindset. And let's stay there for a second. Let's go on to the mindset thread here. And you started to explore this with us in our last episode, but we have a little bit more time today to work through it. But when you talk about the term growth mindset, help us understand more about what that means and how we can make it more accessible for us, and especially in the context of, which I will help to thread through, as it relates to leadership and management in organizations.
Well, if we're going to understand the growth mindset, I think it's important first to understand the opposite of that, which is the sort of fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is the belief that I am the way I am. I cannot change. This is fundamental, and there's nothing. This is how I'm wired. Okay. Individuals adopt the fixed mindset because it's safe. It's adaptive. Let's face it, for many of us, change can be uncomfortable. It can be anxiety provoking. And so with change can come failure, and that can impact our self-esteem negatively. So there's a lot of conditioning to adopt this sort of fixed mindset, if you will. Whereas a growth mindset, we have the attitude that with growth, change is welcome. It's sort of like the attitude of being open to the universe. Individuals with a growth mindset are open to the universe and open to change because they seek change as opportunity for growth and improvement. Okay. There have actually been studies on the growth mindset, and individuals with a growth mindset have been shown to be more apt to seek out discomfort and seek out change or challenges. They have been demonstrated to be more resilient, and they've been shown to have more success, professionally, interpersonally, and higher levels of not only achievement, but also self-satisfaction. So there's a lot of positives to motivate folks and ourselves to adopt this sort of growth mindset. But again, it requires us to be aware of ourselves and what our mindset is.
Angela, this, in many respects, I feel in my experience in working with organizations now for close to 3 decades, what you're sharing here could be for many leaders and for many organizations, the key that unlocks opportunity, performance, better organizational relationship. This is really, I think people don't appreciate how accessible that this is. And it starts with the self-awareness. And then once we are aware of it, what are some of the tools available to us, regardless of whether in the organizational context or not? What are the tools available to us to maybe condition a more of a growth mindset?
I think there are, depending on what context you're in, again, if you're the CEO of a company or a coach, whatever it is, there are goals, and it's finding that carrot, whether it's for the organization, but also for the individual. So there, as a CEO, there are carrots for the company that I want to achieve. But then those may not be the priority for the individual employee. But you can still find that carrot to help motivate the individual and to help them develop this sort of growth mindset for themselves, as well as for the overall greater good, if you will. And so I think it's important to understand and know the individuals you're dealing with, and to be able to come to their level, even though you're the CEO of the company or Jeff Bezos, to be able to understand where they're coming from, listening to them, respect, communication, all of those are important, but really understanding what motivates the individual, because what motivates one may not motivate another.
Wow, well said. Thank you. And I know there are individuals who are listening to this podcast that are scribbling notes down furiously in their journal about this very thing. They want to be able to unlock more of that growth mindset. And I think what's so fascinating to me, as a bit of a history geek, but also someone who has studied human behavior, and the dynamic of mindset and permanent beta for a long time. This is a Johns Hopkins University psychiatrist and forensic psychiatrist saying that there is scientific neuroscience, medicine backed understanding of what we have been talking about for maybe 3,000 years, which is the mindset of someone who seeks out discomfort because they know that's where the growth comes from. We can anecdotally refer to that, or we can study just by observation. But then to be able to say to ourselves, we have good data now, we have good science that rewiring, so to speak, can happen. That's a game changer for people, because Angela, that there are those that will not be swayed until there is the right science behind it.
No, that's absolutely correct. And just to give you an idea, you ask about motivating others. one of the things that I think is important to note is that, an old idea was that our brains are structurally fixed, they're static, they don't really improve. In fact, they deteriorate over time. What we know really from data is that our brains actually are subject to what we call neuroplasticity, which I talked about during the last talk.
Mhm.
But neuroplasticity is really this idea that our brains are not fixed structurally, that we have the ability to rewire or to develop new neural pathways through our experiences, through change, and through repetition. And this is independent of age. This can happen at any age. And so the more it's sort of like our brain is a muscle
Mhm.
that if we exercise can develop and evolve and develop new neural pathways.
Mhm.
Why is this important for all of us, regardless of context? It's important because by exposing ourselves to new things and developing new pathways, our brain can continue to evolve and develop, and we continue to grow and learn, regardless of age.
Mhm. That's powerful. And I think those two foundational pillars, there is such a pull through, Angela, into my world day to day and our world of our team here at Steer LLC, is that we are trying to build better organizations in partnership with leadership. And when we talk about what it means to have an organization that is aware of a growth mindset opportunity that we can actually rewire, but also understanding the carrots, as you say, from an organizational perspective, but also from those that we lead and manage individually and being able to connect those two things. I'm reminded of a story that I read, and I hope I get the attribution correct here, but I want to say that when the new CEO of, he's not new anymore, but the new CEO of Microsoft um, came on board, there was a organizational wide focus on growth mindset. And I'm reminded, and you may be familiar with this author, but Carol Dweck wrote the book called Mindset, and I think that was almost required reading among Microsoft employees to this very point. Is that within, if you look within first, we can collectively also change and grow in that respect, which is pretty fascinating.
No, it really is. And I think, the biggest challenge is, and I find it in my work with that I do, and I'm sure you do as well. But motivating others to seek out discomfort and to change can be really challenging, okay, for the
Mm-hmm.
reasons I described previously. But we actually know, and as there is a growing body of research that demonstrates that when we actually change, not only ways of thinking, but also behaviors. Again, I mentioned that stimulates new rewiring of the brain and new neural pathways, helps our brains to evolve and grow, but it also is correlated based on the data with a lot of positive benefits, stress reduction, increased resilience, emotional stability, improved ability to be productive, and overall more positive outlook on life. So if
Mm-hmm.
we present those carrots, regardless of who you are, who doesn't want that?
Right. Isn't that interesting though, how we become aware of things and practices and habits and clarity that can help us, yet we still don't avail ourselves of it for some reason. It's a fascinating part of the human mind that, oh yeah, I know that can help me, but I'm not going to do that because I guess that goes back to what you said earlier, Angela. Change could mean failure, right? Change could mean discomfort. So I don't want to go there. I'm just going to stay in my comfortable place right now.
I think that's huge. It's absolutely true, and I think a big part of it, going back to your original quote, is self-awareness.
Mm,
The majority of folks go through life and don't consider or think about, who we are or how we are in any given moment, let alone across the lifespan. We're
mm,
so focused by the mundane, the things that we do, our routine, or things that happen to us,
mm,
and those are the focuses. And really, that's fine. But again, if we're talking about neuroplasticity and wanting to develop our brain and to grow and expand,
Mm,
we need to stimulate our brain through new experiences, through trying new things, new ways of thinking.
mm,
Again, what I refer to as seeking out discomfort.
mhm,
Otherwise, what we're doing is we're really continuing along the same neural pathways that have been ingrained in us for years and years, that are normal
mm.
patterns that are reflexive, right?
Yeah.
So in the same way of learning to ride a bike or learning to drive a stick, initially it's uncomfortable, it's
Mm,
difficult, but through practice and repetition it becomes ingrained. So in the
mm,
same way, we can learn a new skill, a new way of thinking, changing negative ways of thinking, or which again, our thoughts dictate our emotions and dictate our behaviors. So if
mm,
we tend to have negative ways of thinking or patterns, the consequences of that can be huge and can
mm,
impact every aspect of our life. So again, finding that carrot, there are a lot of different approaches to how we can incentivize folks to be able to consider the idea that, hey, it might be a good idea not only to be self-aware, but also then to motivate them to seek out the discomfort and to change what they're doing.
mm. This is exciting. This is exciting work that you are sharing with us. This is exciting, accessible opportunity for all of us, regardless of what position that we have in the world. It's incredibly exciting that we have the power to be able to find a better place, to be able to find a better mindset, rewire for better. There are change is hard, but it's going to not only improve the create the benefits that you've identified, Angela, but also it's going in the context of organizational development and leadership. It's giving me such a better perspective on how to motivate, on how to change mindset, how to be aware of my own. You referenced in our last conversation that you can develop a higher emotional quotient and higher emotional intelligence. Like these are practices that are accessible for us. And I think that is unlocking the great excitement. I feel strongly that there's going to be another episode with Dr. Angela Kim based on what we have heard today. But Angela, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your data. It is game changing for us. And we're just very grateful that you were able to join us for another episode on our podcast. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Chris. My pleasure.